Ladies and gentlemen, I did that super cool thing where I took my melatonin and I went to bed and I got comfy and I realized I forgot to do the March recap. Thank God I've already written the entire episode out, so hello, you wonderful people. Strap in for another episode of mind-blowing nature news. Talk to your family, warn your loved ones. This episode changes everything. Actually, it's going to be a pretty normal episode, except for my rapidly waning lucidity as the melatonin takes effect. But a lot has happened over the last month or so, so I'm going to try to get through as many headlines as I can in our limited time together. I actually had to cut this episode in half because there is too much crazy stuff happening. Anyways, I'm also always open to feedback, so let me know if you like these monthly news updates. I'll be adding a video component to these stories someday in the near future. People have said they want to see my face. I can't fathom why, but we will add that soon. But we're going to start with some crazy international headlines. I actually saw a story today which kind of surprised me. Please tell me I still have that headline ready. Oh my god, and I just deleted it. Anyways, German lady got attacked by a wolf. And that was crazy. Oh, found that again. Here we go. So a wild wolf bit a woman in the face yesterday, March 30th, in a busy shopping area in the Altona district of Hamburg. For anyone that hasn't been to Germany, Hamburg is a major port city. So it's surprising that a wolf would be in such an area. But this is the first incident of a wolf attack on a person in Germany since the species was reintroduced to the country nearly 30 years ago. For anyone that is from Germany, I'm going to mispronounce it. Grosse Bergstrasse shopping street near an inner-city IKEA store is where the attack happened. The woman was reportedly attempting to lead a disoriented wolf away from the busy shopping area after it had repeatedly been running into a glass wall. The woman was bit on the face. She received medical assistance on scene and was later treated with stitches at a hospital before being discharged. Experts believe the animal was a young wolf that accidentally wandered into the city while searching for new territory and became extremely stressed by the urban environment. That is so surprising, but the police were called. They spent about an hour capturing the wolf, eventually using a rope, it seems, to pull it out of the water because it ended up fleeing into a lake. The animal was then transferred to a wildlife park outside of the city. Wolf attacks to 2026 is something special. Some more international headlines. Analysis finds urban areas in England where no one lives within a 15-minute walk of nature. I'm from Edmonton. I am very lucky that our city has prioritized maintaining the green spaces that we have. There are certain parts of the city which are not great for nature, and it sounds like in England they are trying to make it so that everyone is within 15 minutes of either a green space or a blue space. So the water or parkland or a river. The data shows 80% of people live within walking distance of one of these green or blue spaces, but it also shows a disparity in nature access between rural and poorer urban areas. Oh my god, shocker, shocker, shocker. People who live on farms are closer to nature. Oh my god, people. Yeah, we didn't need to study for that. Everyone will have access to green or blue spaces under the government's Environmental Improvement Plan, which was published at the end of last year. The government is aiming to make 15 minutes the standard walking distance to these natural spaces. Minister Sue Heyman said spending time in nature is so important for our mental and physical well-being, and this government is committed to delivering better access to nature for people across the country, no matter where they live. I agree wholeheartedly with that sentence. Whenever I'm feeling stressed, which is frequent, I spend time in nature, snowshoeing or fishing or even just going for a walk in one of our urban parks or ravines. I always feel mentally decluttered after a walk like that. Nature campaigners have said government policies to deregulate planning policy for homes and infrastructure could lead to an erosion in the amount of green space available, particularly for those in less well-off urban areas. The new legislation means housing developers will be able to build on once protected green spaces without having to replace the loss of nature in the surrounding area. Yeah, that sounds pretty directly like it will reduce green space. This one kind of pissed me off. I mean, well, it had a good ending. But in Indonesia, authorities seized 3 tons of pangolin scales in a Cambodia-bound container. If you are not familiar with a pangolin, look it up. Pangolin. They are these adorable little mammals that look kind of like living pine cones. As far as I know, they are the only mammal that is covered in scales like that. Armadillo's armor system is a bit different. But hey, that's a big win for Indonesia. We are committed to tightening export controls and taking firm action against any violations that threaten wildlife sustainability and harm the state, said Adang Nugroho Adi. I am so sorry, dude. The head of customs and excise at the port in Jakarta. Pangolins are the only mammals covered head to toe in scales. This armor offers protection in the wild, but makes pangolins easy prey in the global wildlife trade, worth up to 23 billion with a B annually. The mammal's scales are made of keratin, the same protein as human hair and nails, and are prized by traditional Chinese healers, despite the fact that modern research shows no scientifically proven health benefits. Guys, stop eating rare animals. We've moved past that. Well, most of us have. I don't know. I'm not a Chinese billionaire, so I might never experience that kind of a life. On February 18th, officials became suspicious of the shipping container when the documentation provided by the exporter showed 2 types of the goods in the container, but a scan showed 3 separate storage areas. Upon inspection, they found 3,053 kilograms, or 6,731 pounds, of dried pangolin scales worth up to $10.7 million. Pangolins are currently listed as threatened by international conservation organizations. The seizure of more than 3 metric tons implies around 15,000 pangolins were slaughtered. That is so depressing. Swimming all the way down to Antarctica, we have a fun look at the krill fishing industry, which is coming under greater scrutiny as the entire global food system collapses. The environmental organization known as the Sea Shepherd went to Antarctica to show a reporter from the UK-based news organization The Guardian what it was like to fish for krill. Krill are small shrimp-like marine crustaceans that feed on plankton and serve as the main food source for larger marine animals. They also have high commercial value, being turned into ruby red fish oil capsules, sold as health supplements, and being fed to farmed salmon to give the flesh its pink hue. The rest of us have like the standard cheap poor people omega-369 oil, but the ruby red fish oil is quite popular as well. The krill trade is worth more than $450 million per year. Oh my, less than pangolins? Oh no, global wildlife trade. I thought it was less than just pangolin scales. The trade is legal and regulated by an intergovernmental body which sets an annual quota of 620,000 tons per year, which leads to fierce competition as ships vie for the best fishing spots before the cap is reached. The Antarctic ecosystem relies on krill as a foundational food source for birds, seals, and whales. Studies have shown that even the current cap on krill is too high, as the number of krill in the ocean is insufficient to sustain the existing whale population and commercial fishing. Several species that rely on krill have started breeding less, likely due to a reduction of resources. The Sea Shepherd campaign has 2 stages. The first is the fight for attention, getting the global community to pay attention to the scale and impact of the fishing. The second is getting scientists to actually measure the impact of industrial fishing on the Antarctic's whales. Now, living in a modern industrial society means we often have disasters on a grand scale. A recent example of this was the massive sewage pipe that ruptured and leaked millions of gallons of waste into the Potomac River near Washington, D.C. I also didn't realize how small Washington, D.C. is, but if you look on Google Maps and just look at the outline, it's actually not very big. But on January 19th, the Potomac Interceptor pipe ruptured, sending 250 million gallons of untreated sewage into the river just north of the American capital over 5 days. DC Water, the utility that runs Washington's water and sewage systems, worked with the Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies to repair the leak and monitor the ecological impact on the river. Drinking water was never at risk, but boaters, anglers, and other recreational users were in jeopardy due to concerns over fecal bacteria in the water. Again, 250 million gallons? That's just such an insane number. Good on them for getting it dealt with in 5 days. A topic that I'm rather passionate about is the lack of infrastructure maintenance. We are going to see more of this as those budgets are, reduced instead of dramatically increased. There's a great film that I watched, which might still be on YouTube. It was called Damnation, and it actually dove into, I'm going on a side tangent, but it did dive into dams in the United States and the impact they had on wildlife, but also how many are just not being maintained, collapsing unexpectedly, being used way past their best before date. So we are going to see more massive infrastructure failures. In Calgary last year, there was the massive water pipe rupture, which all of the local listeners would be aware of, but it's not good. But now we're going to move back to Canada because quite a bit has happened here too. Again, I had to split this episode in half because there was just too much going on. But Australian mining billionaire Gina Rinehart, oh my god, please don't sue me, has sued the Canadian government for $2 billion since the feds decided the Grassy Mountain mine project was too toxic to proceed. This headline is from the publication The Tyee, Tyee. Check them out for some quality journalism. I always find their stories to be very fascinating. Credit where credit is due. There's a little-known trade agreement called the CPTPP, or Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a pact signed by Canada in 2018 to reduce tariffs and promote economic ties with 11 Asian countries, and includes a provision which allows corporations to sue governments if they feel they have been mistreated, known as Investor State Dispute Settlement, or ISDS. The initial claim was for $7 billion, but was later amended to $2 billion. This case has been ongoing since late 2024. Northback Holdings, the mining company owned by Rinehart, says that it is suing the Canadian government in part for the wrongful denial of its application for regulatory approvals for the Grassy Mountain project by both the governments of Alberta and Canada, and the court's wrongful refusal to set aside those denials. The claim adds that as a result of actions attributable to Canada that were unreasonable, arbitrary, capricious, and unfair, the value of Hancock and Riversdale's shareholding in Northback was destroyed. The Grassy Mountain project proposed to dig up 4.5 million tons of metallurgical coal over a 23-year period in a critical watershed of the Oldman River near Crow's Nest Pass, Alberta. This major river provides water for communities and farm irrigation downstream, which led to water concerns, understandably, and this led to strong public opposition to further coal mining in the Rocky Mountains. There are concerns that the CPTPP, that's not fun to say, Investor State Dispute Settlement tool, could be abused by companies who sue for lost future profits rather than just sunk project costs, which seems to be what is happening here. I don't believe Northback spent $2 billion just trying to get the mine started. But I believe the initial $7 billion claim was for lost future profits. Over in Quebec's lower North Shore, Innu chief condemns cowboy tactics after wildlife officers raid cabin for caribou carcass. For anyone that's not from Canada, the Innu are an indigenous group in Canada who live in Labrador, northern Quebec, that area. But there was an Innu community on Quebec's lower North Shore, which was shaken by an intervention by wildlife officers who circled and attempted to enter a cabin in Equanitshit, injuring an elderly woman in the process. The officers, armed with a search warrant, were there to check for the presence of a boreal caribou carcass, a species of caribou listed as a threatened species under both federal and provincial legislation. Over a dozen officers, including Quebec provincial police, were involved. As officers attempted to enter the house, an elderly woman attempted to block them. When a window was broken, a piece of glass cut her face. Due to extremely high tensions, the officers took only one sample, an ear, from the caribou to prove it was a vulnerable boreal caribou. As a result of the subsequent fallout, wildlife protection officers will no longer intervene in Innu communities until the dust settles. This story was published on February 25th of 2026, and I have not seen any updates yet, and based on the sensitive nature of the story and based on the sensitive balance of Indigenous rights versus police powers in Canada, I feel like they're probably going to try and keep the results of that DNA test quiet, no matter what the result is. This is a story that strikes close to home for me because I am also an ice fisher. But there were some Canadian fishers who were caught in a dramatic rescue after the ice shelf they were on floated away. So a few Ontario anglers were ice fishing on Lake Huron a few weeks ago. The fish weren't biting close to shore, so they moved further onto the ice, drilled their holes, dropped their lines, and waited. After 4 hours, they realized that they were moving. A large piece of ice had detached from the shores of Georgian Bay, and they were drifting out onto the lake. 23 people were trapped on this floating ice shelf. Ontario police were able to send 2 helicopters and 1 air ambulance to retrieve the stranded anglers in an operation that took 2 hours, and luckily all people involved were successfully rescued and returned to shore. I would imagine a few vehicles were probably lost in the process, but the article did not specify. Prince Edward Island students got to have a fun but pivotal hands-on lesson about aquatic invasive species. This is becoming a bigger problem all over Canada. I know in Alberta we get a lot of media about the zebra mussels and the quagga mussels, and there's the whole campaign for clean, drain, dry your boat, which also extends to fishing gear and anything else where the mussels could hitch a ride. But in Prince Edward Island, this new classroom program teaches grades 4 to 6 how these invaders spread. The PEI Invasive Species Council has received funding from the PEI Wildlife Conservation Fund to bring aquatic invasive species education directly into classrooms. The program focuses on grades 4 to 6 and fits well within their existing curriculum. If the students can learn how to prevent the spread of invasive species, such as the goldfish at an early age, it can reap rewards later. Over the winter, the Invasive Species Council has delivered their lessons to 20 classes and about 400 students. There have been many great headlines this month, so for the first time ever, I will be splitting this episode into 2 parts. I have saved most of the Alberta headlines for the second half of the episode, so feel free to join me for part 2. Mwah.